name is Jill Douglas, and this is my story. Well, I have had thyroid trouble for quite some time, and I've had a couple biopsies and several ultrasounds, and it just came time to finally have it out. I just wanted to not deal with it any longer. I had some nodules, and I felt like I needed to find out for sure, was it cancer, was it not, and I was just ready just not to deal with it any longer. So I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and we came up with a plan, and I was admitted for a total thyroidectomy, planning on coming home 23 hours later. I had my sister as my advocate and my husband.
My sister, she's a nurse, as I am, and she asked me to be her advocate when she needed to go into the hospital to have a thyroidectomy. And I think one of the reasons that she asked me to do that was, as nurses, you kind of see things when things go wrong, and it tends to make you anxious because you know what can happen. And so she really wanted me to go with her to be her advocate, because she knew that she was going to be feeling anxious and couldn't advocate for herself.
I went in on a Thursday morning, went into the operating room at 8 o'clock. The next thing that I remember is 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon.
My first challenge as being Jill's advocate was whenever it was time for her to go back to surgery. She was feeling very anxious, and so I helped her get all the way back to the surgery, and they let me go back with her, and we were able to get her on the table. And I remember as I was leaving the surgery suite feeling like I've done all I could do, and I'm entrusting her to the surgery team. And I was anxious because I just helped put my sister on the surgery table, and there was nothing more I can do. And so it was quite alarming whenever she did wake up from surgery and she was not able to be extubated because her vocal cords were paralyzed, were no longer working.
And as I woke up in an ICU room, I was surrounded by not only the sister who I'd asked to be my advocate, Jane, but my sister Judy was there, and my two daughters, Megan and Laura, and my best friend Karen, as well as my husband. And as I came out of this fog, I thought to myself, they're not supposed to be here.
And so what we thought was going to be an overnight stay and going home turned into an overnight stay in the ICU, and then the next morning her having to go back to surgery and getting a tracheostomy.
And then I noticed that I felt a thickness in my neck, and I reached up and they all yelled, "Don't touch, don't touch, you have a trach." And my first thought was, he told me I'd have a bulky dressing around my neck. And then I realized I can't really talk. My voice is gone. And I just happened to pack a notebook. I don't know why I did that. And so I signed for the notebook and tried to write. Later I realized that I had some numbness due to a surgery complication in my left hand, so it was very difficult for me to write. And then also I was still on medication, and so I felt pretty drunk. But it all got communicated to me, and I realized it was Friday. And what they said was that in surgery they extubated me, and I began to strike her, which is partial airway. The anesthesiologist thought that I would wake up and this would cease, and then he realized that I was in trouble, and he had to re-intubate me.
My sister had been out of the ICU for, I guess it was the next day, and on a med-surg unit. And it was time for her to learn how to do her trach care. And I really wanted her to do that herself, because I knew that she was going home and she needed to learn to do that skill. And I wanted them to teach her how to do that so that she could start getting comfortable with that to transition to home.
I was still dealing with the emotional kind of devastation of this horrendous complication. I was supposed to be home. I was supposed to be back to work in a week. What road was this taking me down, and the what ifs. So I'm standing at the sink, very tired and feeling very overwhelmed.
And so the med-surg nurses, they don't get a lot of trachs in med-surg, and so what they did was they called the respiratory therapist to be their mentor, the more experienced person to help them teach my sister trach care. So there were 2 med-surg nurses, one was on orientation, and a respiratory therapist, and they came in, and the respiratory therapist led this learning, and they had my sister stand up at the bathroom sink in the room, and the first thing the respiratory therapist did was they opened up the sterile trach kit, and instead of those come in plastic bins with supplies inside, and instead of dumping it out and onto the sterile field, she takes her gloved hand, which was just a blue regular universal glove, and she grabs the sterile supplies and puts it onto the sterile field. And the 2 nurses saw that, what she did. She just contaminated the kit. And I'm sitting and I saw what she did, but I didn't say anything, and the other 2 nurses didn't say anything either. So I continue to watch. The respiratory therapist, my sister put on the gloves, and the respiratory therapist went on to talk about how to get the trach out and then to wash it and clean it and stuff. And as she's doing that, she's touching my sister on her back, and her universal gloved hands are touching the sink counter. And it comes time to clean the trach incision and also where the thyroidectomy incision was. And she takes her now really contaminated hands and takes the gauze and puts it in the saline solution that my sister cleaned her inner cannula in, and she's just about ready to clean this incision with contaminated hands and really a contaminated gauze. And it was right then that I said in a loud voice, "Stop!" And she stopped, and she turned around, and she said, she's like, "What?" And I go, "You're about ready to contaminate my sister's incision." And when I said that, she was like, she stopped, and that immediately the 2 nurses that were watching just exactly what I did, one of them immediately went, "I'll go get a new dressing." It's like it freed them up to take action when this person had contaminated that kit 3 or 4 times. And I just forcefully said, "Stop." And what we did was we had my sister, who was sterile, she ended up cleaning the incision. And because of that contamination, they brought in a new trach dressing, one of the Telfa trach dressings, instead of what was included in the kit, and they put that underneath my sister's dressing.
After the respiratory therapist and the nurses left, and I finally got to get settled into my chair and all nice and comfy, and Jane and I are sitting there watching TV and kind of processing some of this. My ENT, the associate of the surgeon, comes in because my ENT was out of town for the weekend, and this is the first time I've had an opportunity to meet him. Very nice man, and he looks at me, and he doesn't like the way I have the Telfa slit and kind of coming up my neck, and he goes, "There's a better way to do that." I had told him that we'd just done trach care, and he goes, "Oh, there's a better way to do that. I like a better way." And he goes over to the sink where there's a stack of 4x4s halfway open, and he grabs one of them and he folds them, and he's coming towards my sister with this folded 4x4 gauze that he was half open, and he had not washed his hands coming into the room, and he's headed towards my sister's trach. And as he came towards me, Jane put her hand in front of me in my trach, and she said, "Stop." And I had not quite recovered from the contaminated trach kit, and he's coming at my sister, and I'm like, are you going to touch my sister? And he's still coming at her, with that gauze, and I put my hand up like this to physically stop him. I go, "Are you going to touch my sister?"
And he looks at me and he goes, "What's your concern? What's your problem?" And I'm like, "You haven't washed your hands and you're getting ready to touch my sister."
On Saturday afternoon, we all felt that Jane deserved a rest and that she had done her part. And it was time for my husband and my daughters and myself to start dealing with the situation. So after she taught my husband and my daughter how to suction me if I was needed, and I'm proud to say that I never needed suctioning. That was awesome. And kind of went over a few things. She left. And that was big for me to let her go. But it was time. I could advocate for myself. They knew, what the situation was. They knew what they needed to do. So we went through Sunday, and Sunday night my O2 sat seemed to keep dropping. Nothing really emergency-wise, but I just kept noticing that. And I was concerned about infection, congestion. So the hospitalist came in Monday morning before I was discharged, and I said, "I want you to listen to my lungs before I go home." And he comes towards me, and I go, "You need to wash your hands." And he just laughed at me. And of course I'm whispering. And he said, "I've already washed my hands." And I said, "I came in this hospital without an infection, without MRSA, and I'm going home without one." And he just made a joke out of it. He said, "Well, I can give you RSV," and, rattled off some other ones. And I said, "No, I'm going home infection-free."
I learned several things from this experience, both from being a family member with someone in the hospital and then also as a nurse. I've learned that you do need an advocate. When you go in the hospital, you need an advocate. Whether it's a family member or a friend, you need somebody to look out for your interests and to protect you. And that's really, that saddens me to say, because I am a healthcare provider. But it is necessary. The other thing that I take away as a nurse is, I'm done. I'm done tolerating the no hand washing, tolerating seeing contamination and not saying anything. Because I know now what it's like for it to be my family member in the bed that's at risk for MRSA or C. diff or whatever hospital-acquired infection that you want to call it. And I'm going to be the advocate. I'm going to be the healthcare worker advocate for patients and say stop.